Keep in mind that running it at anything other than the full 90-degree field of view reduces the already less than stellar video quality. This thing is a 90-degree field of view webcam. There are no optical zoom components in it. So if you reduce it to the standard 78 degrees or the less than standard 65 degrees, you're really just digitally cropping the image. If your recording space is smaller, or if you have things on the edge of your field of view that you don't want included in your recording, you're likely going to want to run it at a non-native field of view, which will reduce your video quality. Now, those of you that are planning on using this thing as a face cam while streaming in something like OBS or XSplit would probably be better off just running it at the full 90-degree field of view and then using your streaming program of choice to crop what you don't want off of the sides after bringing the webcam in as a source that way, just to avoid the quality reduction. But those of you that are planning on using this for talking head style full screen videos, you know, like this one, just keep in mind that you're going to be reducing the video quality if you're not running it at the full 90 degrees. Next up, the low light performance on this thing, which is less than stellar. But really, that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. It is just a glorified webcam with a super small imaging sensor after all. Want a digital noise-free image? Well, just make sure you got a lot of light, just like any other webcam, and you will be fine. I'm only mentioning this for any of you that are looking at this as an alternative to using a DSLR or mirrorless camera, thinking that because it can record in 4K, it might perhaps be in another class of devices. I guess I kind of thought that myself, if I'm being honest, which is my own dumb mistake. Just let me set the record straight. This is not the case. While this thing is capable of recording footage in 4K at up to 30 frames per second, it is not anywhere in the same league as an entry-level real camera outfitted with a decent lens. But hey, to be fair, Logitech never said that it was. I shouldn't have thought that, and neither should you. Learn from my mistakes, people. And in terms of plug-and-play functionality, weight, price, and ease of use, this thing's got those other types of devices beat by a mile. Next up, and I mentioned being curious about this during my initial unboxing video, if you are going to be using this to capture 4K footage at 30 frames per second, just keep in mind that obviously your computer is going to be put under more stress when doing so. Jumping from capturing around 2 million pixels to over 8 million of them 30 times a second will result in not just larger files if you're recording the video, but also a much larger drain on your other system resources. You know, like your CPU, your GPU, and your RAM. This turned out to be immediately obvious when I added the 4K Pro webcam into Streamlabs OBS as a source, so just make sure that your PC isn't like barely scraping by if you're planning on streaming with this thing cranked all the way up to 4K. Now, jumping from 30 frames per second to 60 frames per second when using it at 1080p will also result in more resource use. I mean, you are doubling the frame rate after all, but nothing near what you're gonna see if you try and bump this thing up to 4K. Speaking of streaming with this thing, it is worth mentioning that for some crazy reason, the minute that you switch it to any of the 4K modes, and it does have more than one, the video delay goes up substantially, even if you're running it on a very OP desktop like mine. Now, running at 1080p 30 or 60 on a capable PC will result in the video coming in at a smooth pace. I didn't need to delay the external audio coming from my Audio Technica mic right here by even a millisecond. But then again, I never did with my C920 either. But switching things to 4K resulted in a substantial processing delay with the video, even though I have plenty of system resources to spare. And even after all of these months, software and firmware updates, I haven't figured out a way to correct it. Now, obviously, if you're using OBS or something like that, you can just do some testing, figure out what the exact video delay is, and then add a matching audio delay in to correct the problem. No big deal. And you won't even have to deal with that if you're planning on, for some crazy reason, just using the built-in microphones on the webcam, right? Well, actually, no. See, because it turns out to be not that simple. Because there is such a bad video delay when running this thing in 4K, your reactions are going to be way out of sync with what's happening with your game when streaming. So you're going to have to fix the audio problems first and foremost if you're using an external microphone. And then you're going to also have to delay all of your gameplay on top of that just to sync things up with the webcam all the time, which is going to result in an even bigger workout for your computer. It's just a nightmare. But again, if you're only planning on running this thing at 1080p 60, none of this applies to you and you'll be in good shape. Now, for those of you that aren't planning on streaming with this thing and are thinking about using it for more like YouTube content creation or something along those lines, I just wanted to mention really quickly that this is in fact just a webcam, and it does not as a result provide a constant frame rate signal. It is 100% variable frame rate. Now, you might wonder, why in the world does that matter? Well, you see, to reduce the processing strain on the webcam, this thing does not actually pass through a full 30 frames per second consistently to your computer. So you'd think that if you had a 10-minute long